Hi, Glenn here. I am the People's Carpenter, which is kind of just as well because that's also the name of this YouTube channel. And I have just finished a drafting table, fully functional, looks quite nice. I hope someone takes it off my hands now to clear up the space in my workshop, but perhaps more importantly, here's how I did it. Sanding the underside, and then I'll flip it over and do the other side. Sanding the whole thing, but paying special attention to the joins. You'll notice I'm not wearing a mask. I just find this vacuum when attached to the sander is so good. There's just no dust flying around. Maybe I should wear a mask anyway, but I don't feel like I'm breathing anything in. I initially started doing this using 80 grit of the sanding discs that I used to use all the time with aluminium oxide grit on it, and I've obviously gotten spoiled using these ceramic sanding discs because I just found it so bad by comparison. This is 120 grit with the ceramic disc and it's doing a much better job. I don't have any 80 grit of this kind, this Smurdex brand. I must get some, but it's just so much better. That is a change I am so glad I made. Now I'll just use a T-square to make a nice rectangle, starting with that straight edge that I've cut. I'll turn this top around so that I've got more space. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that I wanted to get some of those ceramic sanding discs in 80 grit, which I've since done and sanded the whole thing. So the top is now sanded fairly flat and smooth to 80 grit. I'm going to sand it higher than that. And there are just a small number of gaps that I'm going to fill up. So I'm looking at the underside of the table where on one of these joins there is a slight gap at each end. It's not too large, and I'm just going to fill that with some epoxy filler. It's been a while since I've used this. I hope it's still okay. And it's a 2-to-1 ratio. Is this the hardener? This is the base. Yeah, I think that's about right, hopefully, touch wood, which I am. I'll just give it a bit of warmth. So I'll do this side this end and this end, the other one that you can't see, and then I'll flip it over, do any cracks on the other side, and it sands off pretty easily. I mean, it's hard, but it's sandable. Now there does seem to be just the tiniest of cracks here, because this stuff is fairly thick and it wasn't able to entirely go in, although it has filled the larger parts of it, and there's still a bit more to sand off. The rest will be filled with the epoxy coating that I'm going to be applying to the surface, so I'm not worried about tiny bits left over. On each end of the underside I'm attaching additional pieces of poplar just to brace it and to discourage it from bending, because I know that poplar is not the hardest of woods, it's fairly soft. And the way that I'm going about this, some might have concerns about initially, because think of wood grain as like a collection of straw all joined together along the grains. The grain is going this way along the bottom of the table, and when it expands and contracts because of changes in humidity and temperature in the environment, it does so kind of like a squeeze box. The grain gets closer together and further apart, very, very subtly. And so people say that you shouldn't try to stop that kind of movement, otherwise something's going to give, something will crack or break. And so you should allow for that sort of movement. That's all true, it's definitely true, but it's less of a concern here in New Zealand. A lot of the people I hear talking about this are people in America, and they'll say, look, depending on what state you live in, the climate may be very different temperature-wise and humidity-wise. We don't really have that sort of humidity variation across the country here. New Zealand's not a huge place, so I'm not going to worry about that. I've done similar things with another tabletop. Put bracing on the underside like this, and nothing has ever given way, nothing's ever broken or cracked. Plus this is poplar. Poplar's fairly soft, so there is a little bit of give in it. It's not completely spongy, but more so than a very hard wood like, say, maple, which you are more likely to have in America. So I'm just going to do this, I'm not concerned at all about that. Okay, now I'll do the other side. Before I apply any coating now, I'm just going around every edge, which is somewhat sharp, and just softening it by hand. And then we're ready to start putting some protection on. I almost forgot that I was supposed to put a ledge on the top by the bottom edge so that people could rest their, sketch pad or whatever on it. It's a rainy evening in my workshop while I mix up some epoxy resin wood sealer to coat this. Now, epoxy resin wood sealer is really not a traditional old-fashioned type finish that I would normally be using on historical furniture, but then this is not really a historical piece of furniture either. It's not a reproduction of a historical piece of furniture. It's just something that I decided I wanted to make nice again. Probably only put, say, maybe 3 coats on the bottom and then focus on the top. So there are now several coats on the back, and that's enough now. I have applied 2 to the top, or the front, whatever you want to call it. You can see there is just a slightly different colour in the wood there. And for some reason the wood is thirstier at that point, soaking in more. But I still have a couple more coats to go at least. It's a very rainy day here in Carlton, which is always nice in a workshop. And just given this a somewhat light sand with 240 grit to take down any little bumps or bits of dust on the surface, and I'll give it one more coat of the epoxy resin wood sealer, which should result in a fairly smooth surface. It doesn't have to be like glass, but relatively smooth. Alright, I'll leave that. See what I think of the result when it's done. So the epoxy is well and truly dried, and I didn't plan to do this before, but I've decided I would. I'm giving it a gentle wet sand. The water just carries away any of the material that I sand off. Giving it a gentle wet sand just to flatten the surface a bit more. I wasn't happy with some of those artifacts that I identified previously. So this is just, and I'm removing very little, just enough to produce something like a flat, very matte surface. And then depending on what I think of it after that, I may polish it. This white substance, as you can see sitting on the surface, I don't know if you can there, but you'll occasionally see it sitting on the surface, is just ground up epoxy. Just spotted an area that I've missed over there. As I wipe it off, I can just see some areas that I've missed. They're still a little bit shinier than others, some slightly raised. I mean, they're not obviously raised, but they are raised. So once I've done the whole surface once, I'll go back to those slightly thicker spots and flatten those as well. Now I'm not pressing down on this, I'm just letting the weight of my hand sit on this cork block, and that's all the pressure that I'm applying. And that'll do. And I can see it isn't perfect. There are some areas where it's not 100% flat, but it's a decent, or certainly for the purposes of this table, a decent enough flat satin looking surface. That's not natural wood, that is still epoxy. I haven't gone through it. So what I mean when I say that it's not totally flat, you can see a subtle effect there, so subtle that I'm not certain how clearly you can see it on my little handheld phone camera. called orange peel, which is where some layers are slightly lower than others, and some have been sanded and some haven't, but you can barely make it out. And I don't want to run the risk of trying to aim for the perfect and then sanding through and having to apply more epoxy and then wait for that. I said I wasn't going to do any more, but now that it's fully dry, I can see that it's acceptable in the sense that it will be a nice flat work surface, but the orange peel that I was referring to earlier is a bit more visible now, and I would just like to reduce that a bit more, and I hope I don't regret this. So what I've done is I've put a soft go-between pad on top of my normal sanding pad, and I'm using some 400 grit, and I will wet it as well. Turn the speed on my sander right down. Try and make this as gentle as possible. Okay, that felt pretty gentle. Let's take a look at the result. Yeah, that's better. It's far more uniform. While still retaining coating on the surface. If I look very carefully, I could still see some areas that I could go over again, but I won't. That's nice. I'm glad I'm a bit of a perfectionist, because sometimes that takes the result from okay to very nice indeed. Almost got tempted to get too carried away. Happy with that? Good. Well, it's just about time to put everything back together, but I needed some rubber feet. These are the ones I took off. Some of them were quite damaged. This one actually isn't too bad, but some of them were. And I couldn't find anything just like that to replace them. So what I got is some rubber feet that are advertised as being for cutting boards that you make. And it doesn't really matter that they aren't the same size. It's not a hugely heavy table, and they're pretty solid things, so I think we'll be okay. I just need to be able to rivet it to the underside of the pipe frame, and the holes that are currently in there for the screws are pretty small. I wouldn't get a rivet in there, so I'm going to do some drilling, which should be pretty straightforward. I've done some comparisons, and I'm going to need a 4mm bit to accommodate the top of the rivet, but also that flanged part needs to be able to sit in there. So I've got I forget what it was, an 8mm bit for that. I just need to hold it still. That should, I think, do the trick. Maybe I want 8.5. That won't quite go in. Okay, live and learn. And there we go. Jolly good. I can rivet that on. find out if I can. I assume that'll work. Right, I've got that rivet and the rubber foot in my rivet gun. It will take a few squeezes to pop this off. Didn't quite break off. That's not good. Okay. Are we affixed? Yes, we are. Is that okay? Yeah. That feels pretty solid to me. Okay. I shall do all 4 feet like that. So I have the new top sitting in front of the old top, and they're pretty much exactly the same size. So what I shall do is take some measurements of where the holes are on the original top and draw them, not drill them yet, just draw them onto the new top. So that's about 100 and about 152. Okay. Let's start assembling things. I'll put the frame back together first. Hope I didn't go too far. I tried not to. That would be a pain. Okay. Given that it isn't hugely hard wood, I might actually just try not drilling first and just driving the screw into the wood, treating it as self-tapping, which I think it may be. That's better. I know the bits, the drills, the screws are not quite long enough to go all the way through, so this is safer. Okay. I believe we are finished. Let's put things upright, give it a once over. I still need to clean it, give it a brush down. It's got bits of dust and stuff everywhere before I take photos to sell, but here's hoping. I did pop through. There's a tiny little hole right there now. Nothing to be done about it really, but that's annoying. Bother. Okay. Oh, it doesn't lift up that way, it lifts up this way. Well, there we are. There it is, fully functional drafting table. I mean, the frame is still not particularly high end, but at least it looks a bit better. It's got a nice top on it, nice solid poplar, water resistant coating. Still needs to be cleaned off. There's some dust from when I was doing the sanding. We do have some artists in our home. It would certainly get use if it was a piece for me, but no, we don't have space for it, and hopefully somebody else out there will have a use for it, because I'm going to list it later today on Marketplace, and hopefully somebody buys it, frees up this room in my workshop, and enables me to make more stuff. Until next time.